The first sign of invasion wasn't ships in the sky or sirens in the streets. It was silence, no internet, no satellites, no communications, just a global blackout that happened at exactly 403 a.m. UTC. 1 minute the world was online, doom, scrolling, streaming, swiping, and the next everything stopped. Planes fell from the sky like rain, power grids stuttered, cities dimmed. People didn't panic at first. They thought it was another outage, maybe some cyber attack from a rival nation. But then came the sound, a low hum like a swarm of 1,000 machines grinding in sync, echoed across every major city. And then, above the clouds they appeared. The ships were vast, floating monoliths, shaped like blades slicing through Earth's sky like they owned it. Not flashy or dramatic, just cold black steel hovering with purpose. They didn't fire, didn't speak, just watched. 2 days later, the first message came, not on any human frequency, but projected into every human mind at once, like someone reached in and forced the thought onto your brain. You are conquered, your leaders have been neutralized, your military is disabled, surrender and adapt. Resistance will result in extinction. The bastards called themselves the Vakar, some ancient galactic authority that had cleansed thousands of civilizations before us. They didn't rage, they didn't boast, they didn't need to. They thought we were nothing more than another species to be catalogued, dissected, and repurposed. In London, the king vanished. In Moscow, the Kremlin turned to glass overnight. In Washington, D.C., Air Force One was found in the Atlantic, ripped in half. They hit hard, surgical, fast, no warning, no mercy. They didn't bother sending ground troops, just drones, machines with no emotion. They calculated humanity would fall within 3 days maximum, but they didn't understand one thing: humans don't do surrender. Drew Archer had been awake for 72 hours straight when his unit first saw one of the drones up close. He was a former Marine, but the war hadn't started with soldiers, it started with nobodies. Farmers, ex-cops, gang members, old vets, and junkyard mechanics who picked up a rifle and decided, not here. Drew was holed up in an abandoned fuel depot somewhere outside Houston. What was left of his unit, 6 guys and a moot named Boomer, were watching the skies, waiting for the drone's return. It had passed overhead the night before. Scanning, he'd seen what those scans did. 1 second a house stood intact. The next the roof peeled off like paper and the people inside dissolved into ash. His buddy Tors had said, "We're already dead, just don't know it." Yet that Drew had looked him straight in the eye. Not me, not my family, not this soil. The others thought he was crazy. Maybe he was, but he had something the vicar didn't: hate. Burning, relentless hate for what they did, for how they looked down at Earth like it was a broken toy. That night, when the drone came back, they were ready. It was sleek, 4 metallic wings, almost silent, hovering a foot off the ground. It moved with this eerie grace, like it was scanning ghosts. But Drew knew machines. He'd stripped tanks in Iraq. He'd rewired drones in Syria. He understood code like some men understood prayer, and what he'd built, with a little help from a stolen power cell in a car battery, wasn't pretty. But it worked. The EMP went off like a thunderclap. The drone screamed, actually screamed, as it spasmed in midair, crashed and twitched on the dirt. Sparks flew. Boomer barked like hell. Drew walked up to it, shotgun in hand. "You wanted surrender," he Whispered, "Here's my response." He pulled the trigger. 3 times metal splattered and something inside that drone, something organic, let out a dying wheeze. It wasn't just a machine. Within a week, Drew's team had taken down 4 more. Word spread fast. Resistance cells popped up in cities, forests, deserts. No leaders, no flags, just humans too. Damn stubborn to die quiet, but the Vakar noticed, and they started sending something new. Not drones, not machines. Hybrids, and that's when things got personal. The corpse of the drone sat in a pit behind the depot, covered in a tarp that flapped in the late night wind. Drew hadn't told the others what he found inside, not in full detail. He couldn't bring himself to. It wasn't entirely machine. That much was obvious when he cracked open the casing and found veins threaded through the wiring, a pulsing green gland wired into its sensor core. Something was alive in there, or had been a parasite maybe, or worse, part of something bigger. Tor stood nearby, puffing a cigarette, nervously eyeing the covered wreckage. It screamed, "Man," he muttered. "Drones don't scream." Drew didn't answer. He was busy soldering together a field jammer with scraps they'd stripped from the depot's ancient generator. His hands moved with sharp precision, muscle memory built from years of mechanical training and battlefield improvisation. But his mind was still on what he saw. Not just the organic tissue, but the lie. For a moment when it died, the drone had opened a hidden compartment like a final fail-safe. Inside was a single red lens, round and pulsing like a heartbeat, and it blinked, not mechanically, consciously. It looked at Drew before going dark. Whatever the Vikar were, they weren't just conquerors. They were watching, studying, learning, and now they knew. His face, 2 days passed with no new drone activity, just that eerie hum in the sky that never fully left. Boomer barked at shadows. The men slept in shifts. Tension stretched over them like piano wire. That's when the radio crackled. "Anyone in the southeast quadrant, we have contact. Hostile engagement. Coordinates 79 Alpha. They're not drones. Repeat, not drones." Static swallowed the voice, but it was enough. Drew turned toward the others, jaw clenched. "We move now." The depot was abandoned. Before the sun rose, they packed light supplies, weapons, and the field jammer Drew had rigged. The road south was littered with scorched vehicles and collapsed overpasses. Houston had turned into a skeleton of blackened glass and warped steel. The Vakar weren't just targeting resistance, they were erasing the landscape. By noon they reached the coordinates. What they found wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. Bodies were strung from power lines, skin peeled back, torsos open like autopsy display, signs of resistance fighters. But they weren't shot, they were opened, studied. Boomer whimpered. Even Tor's turned pale. Jesus, one of the younger guys, whispered, "What kind of sick bastards do this?" Drew didn't speak. His eyes scanned the scene, every detail burning into his mind. This wasn't fear, it was message. The Vakar wanted them to know. "We see you, we're coming, and we're not playing anymore." Then he saw it. At the edge of the massacre, half buried in rubble, was a body still moving. She was barely alive. Skin like parchment, eyes sunken, breath rattling, but she was human, or at least used to be. They dragged her out, laid her in the back of a pickup. Drew leaned over. "What did this?" he asked quietly. Her eyes rolled, lips cracked. One word. Escaped hybrids. She died before she could say more. They buried her under a pile of broken rebar and cinder block. No time for ceremony. But Drew knelt there for a long moment, staring at the dust. Hybrids, he muttered, son of an NBSP and NBSP. That night the hybrids came. They weren't machines, they weren't fully alien either. The first one stepped into their camp just after midnight, silent as shadow. 7 feet tall, skin like obsidian glass. Humanoid form, 2 arms, 2 legs, but longer, stretched, unnatural. Its face was a half mask of smooth bone with no mouth, just slits where a nose might have been, and its eyes, God, those eyes, pure black yet shimmering like oil. Tors was on watch, didn't even have time to scream. By the time the others woke up, Tors was gone, dragged into the darkness. Then the screaming began. Drew grabbed his shotgun, pumped 2 shells, and ran toward the noise. Boomer tore off ahead of him, barking wildly. Flashlights swung in all directions. Voices shouting. He found Tors 20 yards away, pinned against a tree. The hybrid stood there, one hand on his throat, watching him, studying him. It tilted its head like a curious predator and then slowly, deliberately, crushed Tors' windpipe with a single squeeze. Drew fired. The slug hit center mass. The hybrid flinched but didn't drop. Second shot straight to the face. The bone mask shattered, revealing something underneath that was an alien, not entirely a human. Mouth twisted, disfigured but human. Drew froze. His brain couldn't process what he was seeing. Tors, he whispered, even though Tors was dead. The hybrid let out a hiss, more pain then rage, and stumbled backward. Black blood sprayed the trees. Then it turned and ran fast, too fast to follow. Boomer barked at the retreating figure, but didn't chase. The others arrived seconds later, too late to do anything but look down at what was left of Tors. One by one, they looked at Drew. Did that thing have a human face? One of them asked. Drew didn't answer, because yes, it did. They moved camp again, further into the hills. No fire, no talking. Everyone was too shaken. The realization was settling in like poison. The Vicar weren't just killing people, they were using them. Experimenting, splicing, merging. Hybrids weren't just weapons, they were warnings. Drew sat alone by the edge of a broken highway, staring out over the dead city. The Houston skyline was gone. Now just jagged skeletons against a blood-orange sky. Boomer lay beside him, silent. He pulled a flask from his pocket, last of the good stuff, and took a sip. It burned like hell. He didn't mind. From behind him came a quiet voice. You ever think maybe we already lost? He turned. It was Juno, former National Guard, joined up after her unit got wiped outside El Paso, tough as nails. But right now she looked hollow. Drew shook his head. Losing means surrender. We're still breathing. That means we ain't done, she scoffed. They're turning us into monsters, Drew. That's not war, that's butchery. He looked back at the city. No, that's desperation. They're scared. She laughed bitterly. Scared, they wiped out half the planet in a week, and they're still trying to break us, he said. If we were really nothing, they wouldn't bother. She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. The next day they found a survivor, not one of theirs, one of the Vicar, or so it claimed. It stumbled into camp mid-morning, unarmed, barely standing, leaking black fluid from what looked like a chest wound. Everyone Aimed guns. Drew stepped forward, motioned for silence. The creature spoke through voice box that glitched with every word. I defected, said. I failed protocol. They hunt me. Drew didn't lower his weapon. Why come to us? The alien looked up, and for the first time he saw fear in its expression. You are unpredictable. Dangerous. That is why you must be destroyed, but you're here, so why are you not fighting us? It tilted its head. Because you do not stop. If you do not yield, we do not understand. It terrifies. The council. Drew exchanged a look with the others. There it was. Confirmation. The Vakar weren't gods. They were just another empire, and empires fall. The defector died 2 hours later. Drew made sure it wasn't a trap. They burned the body after dissecting its gear for intel inside its wrist pad. They found coordinates, a facility 1 that wasn't alien built but human. Underground. North, somewhere near Colorado. Drew looked at the map. It wasn't just a lab. It was a conversion site where the hybrids were made, where tours might have been taken. He looked at Juno. We hit it. You sure? She asked. Might be a trap. He nodded. Doesn't matter. We hit it anyway. March north began at dawn. They picked up more fighters along the way. Stragglers, lone wolves, even a couple deserters who couldn't stomach running anymore. The group grew from 6 to 23 in a week, and every night the hybrids stalked them. They never attacked directly again. Not yet, but they watched, always from the edge of vision, letting them know we're here, we're waiting. Drew didn't flinch because he was watching back, and if the Vakar wanted a war, they just got one. The trek to Colorado was hell, cold, dry, and steep. They hiked through mountain passes lined with dead forests and crumbling roads, skirting cities that looked more like charred skeletons than anything once called home. At night, the sky lit up with flickers of green lightning, Vicar atmospheric scans that rippled across the clouds, like the aurora borealis from hell. Drew Archer led the convoy with a rifle slung across his back and silence in his mouth. He hadn't spoken more than a dozen words since they left the last burn site behind. Not because he didn't have anything to say, because he was listening. The hybrids weren't just following them anymore, they were whispering. Sometimes in the dead of night, he'd wake up to the sound of his own name, carried by the wind, like a voice buried in static. Drew. Other times it wasn't a whisper, it was a scream, familiar voices, dead ones. Tors, his brother, even his ex-wife. The Vakar were inside their heads now. Psychological warfare, and it was working. The group was thinning, not from death but from madness. Day 12, they lost Braddock, big guy, heavy gunner, tough as granite, snapped. In the middle of the night, started ranting about cleansing the impure, then walked straight into a ravine. No scream, just the sound of bones breaking. Drew stood at the edge and stared into the black pit. No sign of a body. He didn't say a word, just turned and kept walking. By the time they reached the edge of the Colorado facility, they were down to 16. The coordinates led them to a snow-drenched valley tucked between mountains, nothing visible from above. But buried beneath the rock was an entrance camouflaged under rubble, vines and frost. It looked like a rock slide, natural, untouched, but the door embedded inside had fingerprints, human ones. Drew wiped the ice away and saw the letters carved faintly into the steel. USB IOM a NDSIT-09. Authorized personnel only. His stomach turned. This wasn't alien. This was ours. They broke in using a shaped charge rigged from scrap and det cord. The explosion echoed through the valley. But Drew didn't care. Subtlety was dead. He wanted them to know. Inside was darkness, no power, no movement. The walls were smooth metal, scorched in places with wires that had long since rotted to rust and exposed bone-like tubing. The facility stretched downward in a spiral, like descending into the Earth's rotting core. The deeper they went, the colder it got. Then they found the first chamber, rows of tanks, human-sized, filled with green fluid, and inside them people, or what used to be people. Some were half-changed, faces twisted, one arm fused with metallic spines, torsos lined with gill-like slits. Others were long dead, floating like forgotten meat. Juno vomited, others turned away. Drew walked right up to one tank. Inside was a young man, maybe 20, still alive. Eyes open, watching him, but he couldn't move, couldn't blink, just stared in a silent, endless scream. A control panel blinked weakly below. Subject 312B. Conversion 86%. Status incomplete. Order awaiting neural seeding. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. Juno stepped forward. This ain't alien tech. Drew nodded. No, it's not. They were using old black budget labs. Repurposed, enhanced, what started as off-the-books military experimentation decades ago had become the Vacar's backdoor into humanity's DNA. The aliens hadn't invented the hybrid process. We had. They just perfected it. They moved deeper, room by room, hall by hall. What they found got worse. Surgical bays with restraints lined with claw marks, brain scan units reprogrammed to inject foreign memories. One hallway led to a nursery, dozens of tanks filled with infant-sized hybrids that had never been born, still twitching. But the worst was the archive room. There on dusty terminals, still connected to emergency battery power, were video logs. The group gathered as Drew played one video log. 44. Dr. Howard Crane. Date pre-invasion, 3 months before blackout. Gaunt man appeared on the screen. Military lab coat, pale eyes, speaking fast, desperate. We received the transmission 3 months ago. An offer. Technology in exchange for samples. They promised evolution, said they'd guide us into the greater network. The Pentagon approved it, not openly of course, but the deals were made. Facilities like Site 9 were green-lit to collaborate. He looked over his shoulder like someone was coming. It wasn't an invasion. Not at first. We invited them. We thought we could control it, splice it, own it. God forgive us. We opened the door. He reached forward as if to shut the camera off. If anyone sees this, don't trust command. Don't trust DC. They gave us away before the first ship even landed. If you're watching this, run. Static. The screen went dark. Juno stepped back, rage in her voice. So that's it. Our own people sold us out, gave them a foothold. Drew didn't speak. He stared at the screen, the weight of realization pressing on his shoulders. The Vacar weren't just invaders. They were partners, partners to traders in power who thought they could leash the storm. He turned to the group. No more hiding, no more running. We blow this place sky high, burn every tank, melt every lab, and then we go for their relay tower. Someone scoffed. You mean the one in orbit? Drew nodded. We find a way up, we take the fight to their sky. They rigged charges throughout the facility, fuel cells, old warheads jury-rigged. Detonators took them a full day. Moment they stepped out into the snow. Again the hybrids were waiting, not one, not 10, hundreds, crawling down the mountainsides, pouring out of the trees. Dozens of forms, some tall, some twisted, some barely recognizable as human, and at the center of them one creature stood taller than the rest. Its skin was molten black, its eyes burned crimson, and its voice echoed inside Drew's head, "You are infection. We are the cure." Drew raised his rifle. Then, "Come get me, you freak." The sky exploded behind him as the facility detonated. Fire bursting up like the earth had vomited flame. The hybrids shrieked and the war began. Bullets tore through twisted limbs. Juno emptied a full belt into the flank while screaming curses. Boomer lunged at one hybrid's throat and didn't let go, even when it took him down with it. Grenades lit up the pass. Blood, black and red, painted the snow. Drew fought like a man possessed, like this was personal because it was. This was the price of betrayal, the cost of power traded for survival, and he was going to make them all pay. They didn't win that battle, but they survived. Barely. 7 made it out alive, crawling through ash and bone. Boomer was gone. 2 others were unrecognizable, but they hybrids were decimated. The site was ashes, and in the fire's glow Drew saw something fall from the sky, a drop pod. Metal, sleek Vickers design. It embedded in the snow and hissed open. Inside, suit, not alien, human, tagged with the old U.S. Space Command insignia, scratched out, repainted with something else. The resistance, and a voice crackled over a built-in comm. "Riker, if you're alive, suit up. We've got a shuttle and we're going up. Time to show them what Earth tastes like when it bites back." Snow melted around the crater where the drop pod landed, steam hissing into the wind like a wounded animal. Drew Archer stood above it, blood caked on his jaw. One eye swollen shut, ribs probably cracked. His gloves were half burned. The rifle in his hand nearly out of ammo, and the only thought in his head was, "We're still not done." Inside the pod, the suit was unlike anything Drew had ever seen, and he'd seen top-tier prototype armor during his time in Black Ops, but this wasn't just military gear. It was revenge forged into a chassis. The armor was matte black with carbon flex plating across the shoulders and ribs, a spine rig that connected to neural input nodes, pulse reactive boots, a sealed helmet with adaptive targeting software and HUD overlays in multiple languages. Human design, but based on stolen Vacar tech. Strapped to the inner wall of the pod was a data pad blinking red. Destination: Orbital Relay Tower VR1. Status locked pilot. Awaiting verification. Beneath it was a note burned into the casing: "You want to finish this? Get in. It's a one-way ticket." Juno limped up beside Drew, one arm in a makeshift sling. Her face was gaunt, bruised, covered in dried blood. "You sure about this?" she asked. Drew didn't answer right away. He stared into the black interior of the suit, saw his reflection in the visor. He looked like a ghost. "I'm not here to be sure," he muttered. "I'm here to end this." 2 hours later, the last remaining fighters of the mountain unit stood at the edge of the drop pod's launch radius. Juno stayed behind. Her leg was shredded and she wouldn't survive the G-force. She knew it. Drew knew it. Nothing needed to be said. He walked up to her, held out a half-broken dog tag. Tors would have wanted you to have it. He said quietly. She took it, fingers trembling. You're going to die up there, she said. Not as a warning, but a fact. Drew smirked. Then I'll take a few of them with me. Inside the pod, the harness locked him down like a coffin made of steel and memory. The suit synced with his nervous system in under 10 seconds, a whisper of cold sliding down his spine, his vision blurred then adjusted, HUD coming. Online neural sync complete, command verified. Drew Archer, Earth Unit 9. Resistance designation, Saber mission. Objective, terminate Vakar relay station. VR1, the countdown began. 10, 9, 8. He clenched his fists, the servos in the suit flexing like muscle. He could feel his heartbeat sinking with the power. Core. 3, 2, 1. The world vanished in a blast of sound and fury. The launch punched through the atmosphere like a sledgehammer made of fire. For a moment, the G-force crushed his lungs, vision dimming at the edges, but the suit kept him alive barely. As he broke free of the clouds, the stars opened up above him, and then he saw it. VR1. A monolithic structure in geostationary orbit stretching like a tower of knives. Above Earth's curvature, jagged, gothic, blacker than night, it spun slowly, connected to other orbital facilities through a network of cables and light bridges. At its center, a pulsing core, an energy relay that kept the Vakars communication, cloning, and command systems linked. You kill VR1, you sever their spine. The pod hit the docking perimeter hard, embedding itself into the external scaffolding. Explosive bolts fired. The hatch blew off. Drew flew into the void. Mag boots activated, anchoring him to the hull. Silence surrounded him. No oxygen, no air, just the groan of metal under pressure and the pulsing signal of the relay vibrating through the structure beneath his feet. The suit blinked. Warning, unknown life forms detected. He advanced. Inside, the station was alive. Walls pulsed like tissue. Lights weren't bulbs, but bioluminescent sacs that reacted to his presence. The Vakar hadn't built a ship, they'd grown one. And it was watching him. Every step triggered a hum in the air, like the station was breathing. Shadows twitched in the distance. Sometimes he thought he heard voices. Tors again, his mother, the girl he left behind in Nebraska before his last deployment. They were using his memories, his regrets. He didn't care. He kept moving. The first contact came fast, a hybrid in Zerog, launching from the ceiling like a spear. It didn't scream, it clicked as it moved fast, twitchy. Drew sidestepped, grabbed its wrist midair, and used its own momentum to spin it into the wall. The suit's servoed arm snapped the creature's neck before it could even react. 3 more followed. He tore through them with the suit's forearm. Blades carbon edge, plasma tipped. Their blood hissed in the vacuum. Then the floor split. He dropped straight into the core chamber. It was vast, the size of a football field. At the center, floating in an antigra cocoon, was the relay itself. Black crystal surrounded by energy tendrils pulsing like a heart. Below it, suspended in liquid stasis, was something he hadn't expected. A man, or what used to be one. Stripped, wired, injected, hollowed. His brain was exposed, tubes running through it. His body had been stretched and modified, spliced with Vakar tech. He was the key, the human neural conduit that let the Vakar understand Earth, our minds, our fears, our strengths, the reason their strategies had evolved. Why Their hybrids had started talking. Thinking like us, Drew floated forward. Boots magnetized to the surface of a scaffolding rail. He stared at the man. In the tank, the eyes opened and the mouth moved. Drew Riker, born in Ken, Texas. Enlisted at 17, dishonorably discharged. Tried to kill yourself in 34. The voice wasn't human, it was the station speaking through him. You are flawed, broken. Predictable. Drew tilted his head. You're still losing, you prolong the inevitable. Drew drew the detonator. Yeah, he said. Let's speed it up then. From the side walls they came, dozens hybrids more advanced than anything he'd seen. Slender, armored, armed with energy. Blades and bone rifles, some still had human faces, twisted and blank. Drew activated the suit's overdrive. Time slowed, he moved like lightning. Shot one through the throat, spun. Gutted another, used one's own blade to stab a third. The chamber became a slaughterhouse, but they kept coming. One tackled him, ripping part of the chest plate off. Another slashed his leg. Blood filled the inside of his helmet. He screamed and drove his blade through its skull. They were wearing him down one by one until he was on his knees, panting, bleeding, vision flickering. The neural conduit above floated closer. You can't stop evolution, it whispered. Drew lifted his head, grinned. No, but I can blow it the hell up. He slammed the detonator. The charge didn't just detonate, it infected the system. Virus coded by resistance hackers who died months ago spread through the relay circuits like wildfire. Firewalls collapsed, systems overloaded. The core turned from blue to red. Vakar's communication link fractured. Planet-wide, every hybrid on Earth froze. Drew used the last of his strength to crawl to the relay core, jam the second charge in place and mutter, for Tors, for Boomer, for Earth, and then the world turned white. He didn't die, not completely. Debris scattered in orbit. The station ruptured, broke in half, and fell toward Earth in a shower of flame. And somewhere, floating in a field of metal and blood, a rescue shuttle from the Resistance intercepted a faint beacon. Inside was a man, burned, broken, still breathing. On Earth, everything changed. Hybrids collapsed without the relay. The Vakar lost control. Their forces went dark, disorganized, vulnerable. The Resistance rose. A global counteroffensive swept through every stronghold. Drones fell. Relay pylons exploded. Humanity surged back into the light. Drew Riker spent 6 weeks in a coma. When he woke up, he couldn't speak, could barely move, but Juno was there. She leaned in and whispered, "You did it, you stubborn bastard." But he knew better. This wasn't over. The Vakar weren't dead, just angry, and humanity had just proved it could win. That made Earth the most dangerous species in the galaxy. 6 months later, the skies over Earth had gone quiet, not peaceful, just waiting. The orbital fires from the VR-1 relay crash still burned in the thermosphere. Every few nights you could see fragments of the Vakar relay fall through the clouds like flaming bones from a dead god, but Earth wasn't celebrating, not anymore, because the Vakar had started responding, not with troops, not with ships, with silence. Drew Riker sat in a wheelchair inside what used to be NOAD, now renamed Haven Command, built beneath Cheyenne Mountain. The war room buzzed with voices, screens, and maps tracking enemy movement across the stars. Resistance techs were running full Neural syncs trying to decrypt old Vakar data while diplomats argued over how to consolidate Earth's new power into something that looked like a unified command, but Drew saw through it. They weren't organizing, they were jockeying, trying to figure out who got to own the victory. His body was still wrecked. Nerve damage, scarring, partial vision. Loss in his right eye, his left arm had been replaced with a synthetic prosthetic linked to his spine. They called it an honor, a battle badge. It felt like a leash. He stared at the cracked ceiling above the war room. Somewhere past all that concrete and armor plating was the sky. He hadn't seen real daylight in 4 months, not since the shuttle dragged his nearly dead body out of low orbit. Juno approached from behind, her limp more pronounced than before. She looked older, meaner. She tossed a tablet on his lap. Vakar movement in the outer belt, scout ship's small probings like they're sniffing around. He didn't look up. They're not scouting, they're watching, waiting to see if we're still breathing. Juno pulled a chair beside him. And he let out a dry laugh. You tell me I'm a half-crippled corpse with a target on his back and a medal I didn't ask for. She nodded slowly. They want you to lead the First Fleet. That got his attention. He looked at her. Now really looked. Juno nodded toward the screen showing Earth's upper orbit. There's a carrier in construction. Name's Wrecker, half human, half reverse. Engineered Vakar architecture. It's ugly, but it works. They want you in the chair, front line, public face. Drew shook his head. They want a mascot, not a commander. She leaned closer. We need someone who knows what it cost. Someone who bled for it. These politicians, these fake brass, they're already rewriting the story. Drew's jaw tightened. What do you mean? Juno tossed another file in front of him. Classified. Project Cedarfall operation status green. Lit objective, Earth Protected Alliance. With remnant Vakar diplomatic wing. He read it slowly, then again. Then he crushed the tablet with his synthetic hand. They're trying to ally with them. Juno didn't blink. The ones who claim they defected say they never wanted war, that the council went rogue, and NBSP, they were killing us, turning us into weapons. Juno nodded. But they're offering tech faster than light, jump gates, full terraforming systems, planetary shields. Everything we don't have. Drew stared at the map of Earth, rebuilt but fragile. It hit him then. This wasn't about war anymore. It was about control. The Vikar knew how to conquer without weapons, offer salvation, trade in desperation. Let the weak ask for the leash instead of forcing it on them, and Earth's leaders were already lining up. That night Drew couldn't sleep, not that he slept much anyway. Instead, he sat in the dark halls of Haven Command, reading intercepted transmissions from the outer colonies, scattered human settlements in the asteroid belts that were trying to stay alive after the blackout. One message caught his eye from unknown subject. You're not alone, Commander. Message. The Vicar didn't just target Earth. They hit colonies on Kepler 22b, TD. Giza, some survived, some fought back. And they're looking to you. Words spread. They call you the Earth Saber, the man who cracked the relay. They're asking one thing: is Earth ready to lead? Juno found him the next morning, already in uniform. The old armor was gone. What he wore now was leaner, darker, modified for Zerug operations and long-haul combat. It looked more like something Ghost would wear than a general. You're going up, she said. He didn't answer, just nodded toward the shuttle. Hangar where the wrecker's suborbital jump craft was waiting. I'll need a crew, he muttered. Real soldiers. Not suits, I've got names, good ones. Survivors, some from your old unit. He turned to her. Juno, if I do this, if I step into that seat, I'm not playing games, I'm not negotiating, I'm not making peace. She nodded. That's why I came to you. First, a week later, the Reckoner launched. Its black frame reflected no light. Spikes of defensive architecture jutted from every angle. Solar sails curled like wings tucked tight, and at its heart was a Vakar energy core stolen from a crashed cruiser. It was humanity's first interstellar flagship. Its orders traveled to the Draeonis line, the outer edge of Vakar territory. Rumors said a rebellion had begun among other conquered species. It's true. Mission: send a message. Earth didn't survive, it learned how to hunt. Drew stood on the command deck, watching the stars blur through the viewport as the ship moved into deep space. The crew around him was tight-lipped. Veterans mostly. No parades, no press. Just people who'd seen too much to ever go back to normal. They passed through the jump gate with a roar of dimensional energy. The stars twisted, reality bent. And when they emerged, they were no longer near Earth. They were in Vakar space, dead moons, orbital husks of planets long harvested, silent graveyards, and one beacon, weak, blinking, hidden inside a gas cloud. Juno's voice came through the comm, picking up the signal. Looks like it's coming from a resistance pocket, not human. Drew tapped the console. Set course, no weapons. Let's see if ghosts still talk. The signal led them to a hollow out asteroid. What they found inside changed everything. A species older than humans. Thin-limbed, translucent skin, eyes like mirrors. The Sarian thought to be extinct after the Vakar War 50 years ago, but they'd survived barely, and now they wanted to fight again. The leader, if you could call it that, spoke in low tones, translated through neural sync. You burned the relay. The signal is breaking. Others are listening. You have woken a war that never ended. Drew stepped forward. Then let's finish it. The Sarian nodded slowly. We will stand with Earth. But the Vakar Council, they are preparing something worse. Drew narrowed his eyes. Worse than hybrids. They are remaking themselves. They are tired of conquest. They want perfection. A final form. Juno looked up from her scans. Biodata confirms it. They're building something called the Cradle of Unbirth, a living weapon planet-sized, fueled by the minds of conquered species. Drew's jaw clenched. This wasn't war, this was extinction. Perfected, they returned to the Reckoner. No ceremony, just purpose. Drew stood in front of the war table, his voice low but heavy with steel. We don't wait for Earth to get scared. Again, we don't let another relay happen. We hit them first. We go to the Cradle, we burn it. A young crewman spoke up. But sir, it's on the edge of the black hole, near the core. Drew looked at him. I said we burn it. No one argued. Space near the galactic core didn't look like the rest of the universe. It felt wrong, thick, heavy, like swimming in oil instead of drifting through vacuum. The stars were more distant, twisted. Time itself had a limp. Communication delays stretched to seconds. Neural link pings staggered. Even thought seemed slower. The Reckoner crept forward under silent running. Hull temperature dropped to sub-zero to avoid detection. They were hunting ghosts now. deep in the forbidden dark, where light broke and sound never came back. Ahead of them loomed the gravity well, a black hole so dense the nav system refused to label it anything but Oblivion Zone 7, and in its orbit lit by the faint glow of artificial suns, floated the thing the Saran called the Cradle of Unbirth. It wasn't a ship, it was a goddamn planet, spherical, alive, breathing through vents the size of cities. Its surface was covered in biomechanical ridges, vein-like light, trails pulsing in rhythmic patterns. Massive towers jutted into space, sending coded signals across untraceable frequencies, and deep inside it scans showed movement, millions, not Vakar, not hybrids, being sleeping, breathing, transforming. Drew Archer stood at the forward observation deck, arms folded, body tense inside his new neural synced command suit. His synthetic arm buzzed faintly, reacting to the proximity of the Vakar biotech. His voice came low, sharp. Zoom in on the central core. The screen shifted. A black spire sat at the planet's center, at its peak. Spire of flesh and steel twisted skyward, where bodies were suspended in fluid cocoons, their faces locked in frozen expressions of pain. Juno flinched. What the hell is that? One of the Sarian advisors stepped forward. It moved slow, deliberate, like its bones remembered war too well. Those are the cradled captives injected with mutagen. Their thoughts are harvested, their DNA rewritten. Every scream is coded into the cradle's next generation. The final species. Drew's hand clenched into a fist. And Earth's leaders want to negotiate with this. The Sarian didn't blink. They already have silence. It hit the command room like a bomb. Juno stared. What did you just say? The Sarian turned toward her. Your government sent envoys, secret, months ago, while Earth burned. They came here, they saw the cradle and offered tribute. Drew's jaw clenched. He turned to the console, pulled up the classified data from Earth's Council, cross-referenced encryption tags, backdoor intercepts, codes he'd kept just in case. There it was. Operation Legacy offering approved. United Coalition Command, UC objective. Submission protocol in exchange for genetic integration. Juno whispered it out loud. They offered our genome. Sarian confirmed it. They offered the best of your kind. Children, soldiers, artists, engineers. The cradle absorbed them, not to kill, to become them, to erase them by evolving past them. Drew staggered back a step. It wasn't war, it wasn't conquest, it was replacement. The Vakar had lost the relay war, lost the hybrid control, so now they'd found something cleaner, a way to make humanity obsolete. Back on Earth, the Council would call it progress. Here on the edge of a black hole, it felt like genocide. Suit up, Drew growled. We're not sending a message, we're sending a funeral. The wrecker went dark, blackout mode minimal. Power zero, emission drive. Every soldier on board moved like ghosts. Armor sealed, weapons setting to Drew's neural net. The target, a thermal exhaust port hidden near the equator of the cradle's outer ridge. It wasn't a weak spot, just the only way in. The drop pods fired like silent bullets, aimed toward the surface. Drew's pod rattled as it pierced the cradle's living skin. A mix of metal and flesh shrieked as the clamps engaged, and the door burst open. He stepped out into the guts of something that should never have existed. The corridors were organic, walls pulsed, lights flickered with veins of luminous ichor. Every few feet, something moved behind the walls, shapes. Like fingers pressing against skin, they moved fast, no words, just focus. Objective reached the central tower, as they cut through the cradle's internal passageways. They passed chambers lined with bodies, human Vakar Sarian. Others they couldn't identify, each one wired into the walls, eyes peeled open. Neural cables drilled into their skulls. One resistance fighter puked inside her helmet. Drew moved without pause. They reached the lift shaft and rigged the line. Grapples hissed, launching them upward toward the core. Silence all around until a voice broke in, familiar female, cold. Drew, he froze mid-ascent. The others halted. You made it, the voice came from inside the cradle, not broadcast, not external. It was the cradle speaking to him through her. Rebecca, Drew whispered, his wife dead in the first wave of the invasion. Her voice hadn't changed. You were always stubborn, always broken. But we can fix you. Let go, be part of what's next. Juno swore. It's not real, keep moving. But Drew stayed still, eyes closed. It was her voice, her inflections, her tone. Down to the pause she used when she was mad at him, the way she said his name. You lost Earth, you lost me, and now you're going to lose yourself. Drew opened his eyes and answered, no, I found something in the fire. He climbed. The core was a throne room built for gods. The ceiling stretched for Killam. Massive organic pylons held up a central column of pure energy, the cradle's brain, and waiting for him there was the council. 5 figures, tall, ethereal, wrapped armor made from the bones of their enemies, eyes glowing with ancient thought, each one radiating a different color, each one tethered to a cocoon of living code, the thoughts of thousands pulsing behind them like memories screaming to be let out. Drew stepped forward, rifle in hand, team spread behind him. The center figure spoke. You are chaos, Drew Archer. You are pain. Refined, fire-given thought. That is why we feared you, but you are also doomed. This war is over. You cannot stop what we have become. Drew raised his gun. I'm not here to stop it. Then why come? He stared at them and said the one thing they didn't expect. To show the galaxy we never stopped fighting. The battle that followed couldn't be called a fight. It was slaughter. Vakar elite warriors poured in, spliced with the memories of Earth's greatest fighters. They knew tactics, flanked with perfection, shot with precision, fought like monsters. But Drew's team didn't break. They endured. They cut them down in a storm of blood and steel. The cradle screamed around them, the walls distorting, reacting to pain. The council moved in unison, trying to trap them with psychic feedback, emotion. Weapons meant to turn their own guilt into paralysis. It almost worked. Juno collapsed. One of the squad shot himself, screaming about seeing his daughter's face. Drew dropped to one knee, his wife's voice in his head, whispering hate and sorrow, trying to drown him until he remembered Tor's Boomer, the girl in the colony, who lost both legs and still dragged herself to deliver medical supplies. Juno holding the line on one good leg. He remembered Earth and he stood. We are not perfect, we are not pure, but we are human and we don't stop. And then he pulled the final charge from his chest, rigged the exovirus, something cooked up in a dark lab by Sarinian biocoders and human defectors who turned back before the end. It was never tested, never approved, because it wasn't meant to win. It was meant to erase Suit injected it directly into the cradle's core. The planet shuddered. Sky cracked, the council screamed, and Drew Archer, drenched in blood, looked into the eyes of the Vakar's future and said, "Your evolution ends here." Reckoner picked up the signal 10 minutes later. One word: done. Then the cradle collapsed into itself, a black sun, devouring its own light, and just before it vanished, a single escape pod shot from the blast. Inside, half dead, scarred beyond recognition, but alive, was Drew Riker. 8 weeks later, Drew Riker stood on the tarmac of Earth's largest orbital docking station, Haven Sky, watching through polarized glass as the cradle's ashes burned in the upper stratosphere. Even now, fragments still fell. Some pieces were the size of cities, others were small enough to look like shooting stars. People down below called them wishes. They didn't know better. Drew did. He'd walked through those corridors. He'd heard the screams. He'd seen the faces frozen in tanks. Faces from Earth. There were no wishes. In war, only scars. A crowd gathered on the lower level behind military cordons and ceremonial banners. Reporters, politicians, civilians with flags and roses. Digital banners flew across the screens. Earth Savior returns. Hero of the Black Core. The Saber walks again. He hated it. They called him a hero, but Drew didn't feel human anymore. Not after what the cradle had taken from him. Not after what it had shown him. Juno met him at the hangars edge. Her hair was shorter, her face even harder. A general's uniform hung heavy on her shoulders. They hugged without saying a word. She was the only one who didn't smile. Later, inside the debriefing hall, the air was stale with politics. A dozen Earth Coalition leaders sat at the conference table, each in finely pressed uniforms that had never seen combat. Their hands were soft, their eyes calculating. General Marius was first to speak. He was old government back when Earth still believed in hidden treaties and quiet betrayals. The same man who approved the early diplomacy with the Vakar before the war ever began. We've reviewed the classified logs from the Reckoner, confirmed the detonation. The cradle is gone. Well done, Commander Riker, Drew said. Nothing, Marius continued. We believe now is the time to negotiate Earth's position in the galaxy, new alliances, trade routes, peace. That word, peace. Drew flinched. Juno leaned forward. The cradle was their endgame. You really think the Vicar will just walk away after that? Marius smiled. We don't believe they can retaliate anymore. Our analysts say their systems were too interconnected, too dependent on the relay and the cradle. We've broken their spine. Drew stood, walked to the center of the room, looked each of them in the eyes. You're wrong. They shifted uncomfortably. The Vakar aren't dead. They're angry, humiliated, and somewhere out there they're adapting. That's what they do. He pointed to the screen, still playing footage of crowds cheering across Earth. You think this means we've won? It doesn't. It means they've changed the rules. After the meeting, Juno caught up with him in the hallway. You felt it too, didn't you? She said. Drew nodded. They're too quiet. Something's coming. He looked at her. I don't think they're going to invade again. She frowned. Then what? He clenched his jaw. They'll make us invite them. 1 week later, Drew was summoned to speak before the Unified Earth Assembly, a global council formed after the war, supposedly built to protect against the mistakes of the past. He stood at the center podium. Spotlights burned into his face. Billions watched through screens and neural feeds. Every word would echo. Across the system, the president, a former corporate diplomat named Harlan Kaur, welcomed him with a thin smile. His suit was tailored, his hands were soft, he hadn't lifted a weapon in his life. Commander Riker, Earth owes you everything. Your actions ensured our species' survival. Today, we seek your insight on what comes next. Drew looked out at the crowd. They didn't want truth. They wanted comfort. He gave them neither. I've seen what lies beyond the stars. It's not peace, it's predators. We weren't spared out of mercy. We were spared because we scared them. If we let our guard down now, if we start trusting the same voices that brought the Vakar to our doorstep the first time, we'll deserve what comes next. Silence. Tense. Kaur smiled gently. So you're recommending we stay isolated? No, Drew said. I'm saying we stay dangerous. Later, Kaur met him. Private, the conversation was civil. Until it wasn't. You're a relic, Riker. Kaur said, this new galaxy we're stepping into, it doesn't need war. Heroes, it needs diplomats. Bridges, not blades. Drew stepped closer, his voice low. Deadly. Bridges are fine, but the other side. Better. Damn well know we can burn them down. But Kaur wasn't alone, and within days it started. Phase 1, silencing Drew's access to Haven Command was revoked, his clearance downgraded, his data logs misplaced. The media turned quietly at first, then vicious. Commander Riker suffering from battle trauma, Earth's hero or just a mad dog on a leash. Voices in the cradle. Was Riker compromised? They said he was unstable, that the cradle might have infected him, that his warnings were hallucinations born from PTSD and neural degradation. He didn't fight it, he let them talk. He watched because something deeper was happening, and when he saw the first envoy ship enter Earth's orbit, bearing a symbol that was half human, half Vakar, he understood they hadn't defeated the Vakar, they'd absorbed them. Phase 2. Control. The envoy ship was called the Harmony Ark. It docked at Haven Sky. Under full ceremony, out walked a hybrid ambassador, polished, smiling humanoid in appearance but unmistakably Vakar. Underneath the flesh, they called him Representative Adrex. He spoke perfect English, spoke of peace, of shared futures, of genetic synthesis. The crowd cheered. Drew stood on a distant rooftop. Watching the broadcast, he saw the way Adrex moved, too calm, too perfect, like a machine with a face. Juno sat beside him. Same story, she whispered. New cover. Drew nodded. They found a better weapon. She frowned. Which is us? Phase 3, erosion. And within days, Earth's biotech industry merged with Vakar data constructs. Within weeks, schools began integrating peace education, rewriting history to frame the Vakar not as invaders but as misunderstood explorers. Within 2 months, selective enhancement programs began. Children selected for integration trials. Within 3, Juno went underground. Drew disappeared. Publicly, he was declared dead after a shuttle malfunction. Privately, he was already moving, building something the suits didn't expect, in the slums of New Berlin, in the ruins of Moscow, in the ghost zones of Nevada. Drew found the forgotten war veterans, displaced survivors colony, stragglers, Syrian holdouts, rogue synthetics, even a few ex-hybrids who'd severed the connection before it claimed They called themselves the Ember Line, not a rebellion, not yet, but something far more dangerous, a memory that refused to die. And in a buried facility beneath old Denver, Drew activated something that had been dormant since before the war. Project Scorch Path, a ship built in secret by engineers who never trusted the peace. Powered by anti-vacuum frequency fields, armed with dark matter artillery that bent space on impact. It had no name on any record, so Drew gave it one last word. He stood on the command deck looking at the stars. "Let them come," he muttered, "let them pretend we forgot." Juno stepped beside him, weapons module synced to the ship's AI. "What's the plan?" He looked at her. "Scarred, burned, but alive. The plan is to remind them who we are." She nodded. "And who's that?" He turned to the crew, gathering behind him, men and women who had nothing left to lose but everything worth dying for, and answered, "We're the species that said no. The planet that wouldn't kneel." The name they still whisper in the dark. He turned back to the stars. "We're Earth, and we're not done." The last word wasn't built for peace. It wasn't built for parades or polished medals. It wasn't blessed by presidents or broadcasted to the world. It was built in silence, with blood on the floor and resolve in every weld, forged by the broken, the exiled, the forgotten. It was Earth's ghost, scarred, angry, and invisible. And now it was awake. Drew Archer stood at the bow of the ship, wrapped in battle armor no government had approved, surrounded by men and women who had already been erased by the new system. They didn't carry flags, they didn't salute, but they were all pointed in the same direction, toward the lie that called itself peace. Juno approached with a fresh report. "The Harmony Arc is parked above Earth's orbital plane. They've established satellite relays, beam transmissions every hour, indoctrination waves, re-education networks, neural syncing. The Council's message is being laced into entertainment feeds for an NBSP and NBSP sake." Drew didn't blink. "They're not here to fight us anymore." Juno nodded. "They're here to make us forget we ever fought." The Emberline wasn't a military, it was a fire. And fire spreads across the system. Mars, Ceres, Europa, Titan, sleeper cells began to rise. Resistance that had been quiet since the cradle's fall came alive. People who'd once trusted the new government saw too much. A child taken for enhancement, a neighbor arrested for refusing neural syncing, a veteran mysteriously vanishing after speaking out. And then came the signal, transmitted in a single burst from the last word's hull. "Remember Earth." Every screen, every implant, every hidden comm link lit up with the same 5 seconds of footage. Drew Archer, helmet off, eyes burned but blazing, standing in the heart of the cradle just before it collapsed. "They wanted us to surrender. We didn't. Now they want us to forget. We won't." Light it up. The Ember Line ignited. Phase 1 interception. The Harmony Arc didn't see the last word coming. That was the point. While Earth's defense grid was reprogrammed by Vacar integrated AI, Drew's ship flew blind. No beacons, no pings, no signature. It breached the orbital perimeter with a burst of dark matter thrusters and latched onto the Ark's hull like a parasite returning to its host. They cut into the hull with sonic drills, and then they entered. Inside it was clean, sterile, lined with synthetic flora and soothing light. Panels, music played gently, human music, composed by artists who had no idea. Their work had been twisted into indoctrination hymns. Drew's boots echoed on white steel. No guards, no weapons, just doors, doors that open without prompt. They want us to see, Juno said. They want us to understand, Drew corrected. Or they want us to lose our nerve. At the core of the ship they found it. A chamber massive, and inside suspended, in a tank of soft blue fluid, was a Drix. The Vakar ambassador, except he wasn't just Vakar anymore. His body had adapted, smoothed, humanized. His face bore features taken directly from Earth's DNA profiles, eyes like an old movie star, jawline like a general, voice trained in comforting cadence. He looked like the future, and he smiled when he saw Drew. We predicted your arrival. Violence is your language, but we don't fear it anymore. Drew stepped forward. Good. Then this will be easy. Adrix pressed a hand to the glass. You think you've saved Earth. You've only stalled evolution. We don't need war to win. We just need time. A generation. Maybe two, and no one will remember you. Behind Drew, the team was planting explosives. Quiet, efficient. Adrex continued. Do you know how many humans have asked to become us? How many volunteered to be part of something greater, to leave behind pain, doubt, suffering? Drew stared him down. If you take away pain, you take away choice. If you erase struggle, you erase meaning. Adrex blinked slowly. And what has your meaning bought you? Broken body, a dying world. You are fire. Drew Archer, beautiful but brief. The last charge clicked into place. Drew smiled. That's the thing about fire. It spreads. Phase 2 detonation. The Harmony arc shattered in orbit, not just destroyed. Broadcast the footage of its destruction of the genetic labs inside of the indoctrination program streamed across every satellite, still under Berlin control. The truth didn't need permission, it just needed to be seen. Earth went quiet for 12 hours, then it erupted. Phase 3, collapse. Riots in New Shanghai, military walkouts in Toronto. Syrian rebel factions took over entire colonies. Mars declared independence. Syria launched its own anti-hybrid weapon program, and from beneath the Pacific Ocean, a Vakar dreadnought, hidden since the final days of the war, emerged. This time they didn't come with words. They came with cleansing beams. Whole cities vanished in light. This wasn't conversion, it was retribution. Final phase, reckoning. The last word led the counter-strike. Drew Archer in full battle gear, neural linked to a warship born of rage, stood in front of a command crew of 200 fighters with nothing left to fear. The dreadnought was 3 times their size. Its core pulsed with stolen energy. Its cannons burned with the screams of fallen worlds. And Drew didn't flinch. Fire control, he said calmly. Lock onto the core, sir. The officer said, we're too close. Firing that shot will. Drew looked at her. She stopped talking. Do it anyway. The final shot from the last word wasn't recorded, not clearly, just a blinding flash over the Pacific, followed by days of radiation storms and static clouds that blanketed the globe. When they cleared, the dreadnought was gone. So was the last word, and Drew Riker was never found. 1 year later, Earth rebuilt again, but differently. No more centralized government, no more council. Each territory now governed locally. Decisions made close to the dirt, not in towers, the Ember Line became a myth. Warning, some say Riker survived that. He walks among ruins, silent, watching. Others say he became part of the ship, uploaded into the neural core in his final breath, a ghost in the void. But every child in every city learns the same words carved into the side of the cradle wreckage where it fell in Africa. Like a buried titan, they expected our surrender. But we gave them something worse. We gave them memory, because Earth remembers, because pain remembers, because Riker remembered for all of